Okay, let's assemble. So we've got our vertical shaft here. There's really no reason to take the snap ring and washer off of here, but if you did, be sure to put it back on. So the washer goes toward the spiral helix here, and then the snap ring. All right. Our lower gear, just double checking, and bearing. Okay. So I'm just going to give it a tiny bit of oil here. Then your cage needle bearing goes on. Okay. There we go. Now you want to take your either a good condition brass washer. I recommend highly you get one of these steel ones from us. We do sell them. Just email us and we can shoot you a price on that. They're not that expensive. Okay, that goes on there like that. And then you've got your two keepers.
Okay, snap them in. Okay, everything slides up.
Sure you guys can see that. Slides up over your keepers. Now sometimes they can be tight, and if they are, if they're really tight, something's wrong. But a lot of times there is some resistance, and you need to take a block of wood and give that a good wrap to seat that onto the washer and the split rings. Okay, that's ready. All right, so I'm going to take the whole assembly. It's going to go here in our holder, like that. Let me move you guys over a little bit. Okay, next thing is your lift spring for the cone clutch. And remember, this is marked top. Now I did put some oil in here, and there's oil already on the spline because you want this to be free so that we can do our check that we need to do. So this should have some float to it. All right, now we need our shims. Okay, I got one real thin one, the 2000. I'm going to put that on first. That way it'll kind of be protected by the other thicker shim.
Alright, I've got this one.
Just be careful here, make sure that they're not hung up on a gear or creased or anything like that. I did inspect these shims to make sure that there were no folded over edges and such. Okay, all right, that goes like that. Then we take our gear housing and slip it over. Okay, it's a very precise fit. Just give it a visual. All right, that looks good. Okay, now we take our upper gear, and I'm going to put a little bit of oil inside here. I've already oiled the rollers, but it doesn't hurt to add a little more. All right, now if you have shims, now is the time to put the shims on. Remember, this one didn't have any shims, so we're going back without shims. There's no timing marks on these gears like you have on some, like some differential gears will have some marks on them when they do the lapping so that you can line them up. As far as I know, these don't have them. They may have had them originally from the factory, but there's no sign of them once they've had some age on them, if they even had them. Okay, that's nice and snug. We got a ways to go here. Let me get a soft hammer here. Okay, I'm going to take that back off. We may have a burr on there somewhere. Let me get a little heel bar. I'm going to take that all the way off and lube it. It's just a really snug fit, very close tolerance, and all right, let me take a look at this, guys. I'm just gonna go look in here to see if there's any burrs. The only thing I can see is right where the oil filler is. It feels like there might be a little burr. So I got a rag packed in here. Got a piece of 1000 grit paper here. Just give it just a little bit of love here. I see one little spot right there. So you get all that grit out of there.
And I'm going to give it a little extra oil just to try to help it float as it goes in. Okay.
Normally you would have a shim. Okay, so just keep that in mind. There we go. Okay, all the way down. All right. Now, get our other needle bearing. Drop oil on it. Just drops in like such. Okay. Okay, so when we do the final, we're going to put a little bit of Loctite, just a drop of Loctite on this. Left-hand thread. Before we go to final torque, though, we're going to, there's a critical clearance, end plate clearance, that we got to check. It's very important. Remember when we took it apart, I don't remember the exact number, but it was way over spec. Spec is 20 thousandths maximum end plate clearance. And we were getting, I think we were getting 35, something like that. All right, let me get my adapter for this socket. Be right back. Just good and snug for right now. All right, let's see what happens here. Okay, here's a 25 thousandths. Okay, so that's too loose. All right, so we're going to have to do something. They make different nuts. So I'm going to go to my collection and see what I have. I saved you guys the agony of having to watch, but I went through and I tried all my different nuts that I have. They make 3 different thicknesses, okay? None of them are any better, and most of them ended up being worse than our original. So what I'm going to try next, before having to modify one, is I'm going to try one of the other washers. I have another one of this style, and then I have a little different style here. They're all interchangeable, and they may have a little bit different depth tolerance to them. So I'm going to try that first. So I'll probably just do that off camera. So we don't have to disassemble the whole box. So I just took it out of our stand, and you know, this shaft has enough movement, and there's our split rings. Here's our washer. So the spring on the clutch is pushing the shaft back. Okay, so we'll put that one there. And let's try this one. That one's a little tighter fit. I'm going to have to do the tap it on with the block trick. I don't know if you guys can see this. I took a still that might be easier to see. But our original split ring is worn out. It's got some severe wear. It's got a pretty good groove on both sides. That could be why we're having so much trouble with this. So I had another set, so we're going to swap this out. Okay, let's see what we got. Looks like 17 is probably it. So it's 16 in the back. So that nut's probably not sitting perfectly flat. Okay, so that's within tolerance. I like it a little tighter than that though. So I think what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and modify this nut. And we need to do that over at the lathe. I grabbed a spare shaft so I can show you guys how this is made. So here's the end where our nut screws on. Hopefully that's in focus. So we've got a square shoulder here at the end of our bearing race, and the nut, you can see that there's a little recess, a little register that sits on top of that square shoulder. So what we're going to do, we're going to go set up in the lathe and we're going to cut that down a little bit deeper. This is our original nut, so there's different styles as well. I mean, I'm okay with the brass because it's backed up with a forged nut, so it's going to have plenty of strength. But it's a little harder to get in here. You know, this is a rolled over edge that holds the brass in. This style is solid steel, so we're going to use this one, and we're just going to take a little off and keep working it back and forth till we get our fit. Okay, so let me get you guys set up over at the lathe. I had to put a paper shim under one of the jaws to get this to run true. That's good enough. That's within a half a thousandth the total run out. And it's the face that's critical because this centers on the threads, so the concentricity, I mean, although important, it's not as critical as the face. So I've already touched off. I've got a dial indicator set up on the carriage here that you can't see for our Z-axis for our depth. I've got to try to work around the camera here. It's going to be difficult. I don't know how hard this material is going to be. I'm sure it's going to be pretty hard. Let's get in here and touch off. There. Okay. I'm going to feed in maybe just 2/1000ths. Let's see what happens. Yeah, it's cutting. Just going to go a little at a time here. Take 3/1000ths. Another 3. And to our number. Looks like we got down through the hard surface. Okay, then we're going to back out. Okay. Okay, I did hit this with a little bit of Scotch-Brite just to knock off any little fuzz or burrs that might have been on there. Might have went a little too far. But we can switch our washer. Remember that first washer was had a little extra clearance. Okay, so yeah, that's a 5. All right, I'm going to switch that washer. Okay, I think we're going to be good. Here's 12, so it won't go. And then here is 11. Yeah, so we're between 11 and 12. And that's perfect. I mean, that's the middle of the range. So, very happy with that. All right, so off camera, I'm going to take this nut back off. I'm going to put a drop of blue Loctite on there, torque it down to final torque. Final torque is 92 foot-pounds. I had already checked this, but I didn't film it. So one of the things you want to check is that when you're assembled, and you want to do this before you torque everything down, you want to make sure that the spring that holds the cone clutch up is hasn't gotten weak to where this will just, you want it to kind of float in the middle. So this one's fine, it's perfect, okay? But if your spring is weak and this is dropping down, that's when you have trouble disengaging out of forward gear, okay? If you see that this spring is weak, just give it a little stretch, you know. Be careful, don't overstretch it, but you can re-stretch it and get it back to where it'll float that cone clutch right in the middle there, okay? All right, so the importance of getting the shimming right for the end play on the output shaft. When the unit is shifting, the cone clutch is engaging usually forward, right, as you were to use the most. It's engaging your forward cup on the forward gear, which is the bottom gear. And in order for it to lock in and get mechanical force against that cup, the force is pushing the output shaft up. And if you have a lot of slop, it may have trouble engaging in gear, because by the time you add all those extra clearances together, if you've got any wear on the cone or not quite enough travel on the shifting paw, that's one of the things that causes shifting problems. So getting that shimming correct, it makes a big difference, okay? And then I think I mentioned before that when the brass washers wear out, they can get so sloppy that those keepers will fall out. Backing up is usually when it happens, when you're in reverse, and then you slam it into forward. That shaft then gets pushed in the upward direction, and if those keepers have fallen off, it drives itself right through the top of the transmission. We're ready to test fit the pinion clamp ring assembly. Make sure you clean your shims. Same thing on your mating surfaces. Make sure they're clean. I had a little bit of paint overspray. Clean that off. So I'm going to leave the O-ring off. We're just going to put the shims on, and we're going to check our backlash. If everything looks good, then we'll take it apart, and then we'll put on our O-ring and do our final assembly. I got just a little bit of never sees on our bolts. When we go for our final assembly, I'm going to make sure I really coat the shaft part of the bolts good with never sees, anti-sees, because that's the area that gets corroded up and gets jammed in the clamp ring housing. Sometimes these shims can really be a tight fit, but these were not bad. They slid right over. And you got to be careful that you don't get them caught on the O-ring groove when you're doing your test fitting. And this is always fun to get started without binding. I put some oil on the surfaces there. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, now you got to get your gears to engage. I'm reaching around the back, and turning them a little bit. And you can turn the U-joint also. There we go. And just checking the shims, make sure that we're not getting caught up. I'm actually going to start these upper bolts that'll help hold the shim in alignment. I like to keep checking just to make sure nothing's binding up while you're tightening. Okay, I'm going to get you guys in here close. Alright, so the service manual shows setting up a dial indicator to check the backlash. Good luck with that, guys. There's no way you're going to set up a dial indicator on here. So this is a by feel method. So anybody who's got good experience working with gears knows what the backlash is supposed to feel like. So you want to do one gear at a time and make sure that your shifting cone is in the center so it's not engaged. All right, so I'm holding our U-joints. Okay, I don't know if you can hear that. Okay, so we've got backlash. Okay, now I want to check the top one. That one's a little easier to hear and feel. Okay. I'm going to rotate a little bit, check another spot. Okay. There's more on the forward gear than on the reverse gear. The other thing to keep in mind is our bearing isn't clamped tight. Until this entire assembly is completely put together with the lower leg, you know, your bearing isn't completely squeezed in there. All right, so there could be a little extra play, and there probably is. Okay, all right, that feels good. Rotate a little more. You want to check in several spots. Okay, I like that. Okay, I like that. Okay, all right. And I don't know how to explain to you what feels right. It's just something that you just pick up over time. Okay, so I'm happy with, and these are the same shims that came out when we disassembled the unit. Okay, so I like what I'm seeing, so we're going to go ahead and put it together with the O-ring and final torque. This should be common sense, but if your backlash is too tight, where you can't feel any clearance, then you need to add shims here. If it's too sloppy, then you need to subtract shim so that the pinion will go in farther. Okay, we got our new O-ring on there, all greased up. We got our surfaces covered with a thin layer of grease. Got our shims. We're going back in. Got to be really careful. Get this started straight. It'll bind up on you real easy. And then engage your gears. Just reaching behind here. There we go. Make sure the shims are lined up. Okay, and I'm going to put, well, let me see if I can get it. There we go. I was going to get a bolt in there to kind of line the shims up, but they went right in. Okay. Our super anti-seize coated bolts. Okay, before we crank down on those, just make sure everything's still moving nicely. Okay, I like that. Give it a little more. We'll come back with the torque wrench in a minute. 26 foot-pounds. Always just keep checking, make sure everything's moving. I can still feel that backlash in there, so nothing's changed.